The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Irene Varley, Director of Education for the Dibble Institute, and accompanying me today are Kathy Gidray, our webinar organizer. Hey, Kathy.
Hi, good afternoon.
And my colleague, Dixie Zittlow. Today's feature webinar is on managing conflict, addressing the 4 communication danger signs. Unfortunately, I know you all were expecting Aaron Larson to be on this call. Well, he had a last-minute family emergency and reluctantly could not join us this afternoon. So Dixie and I pulled our Dibble motivation together, and we're going to be filling in for Aaron's shoes today. And we apologize for the last-minute change, but we really feel we have kept on Aaron's message. Before I begin, I'd like to point out a few housekeeping tips for you. If you experience any audio difficulties during this broadcast, check out the phone number that's on the slide in front of you. Kathy, you went one too fast.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back there. There we go.
Okay. Because you can call in should there be any audio difficulties. And you can call in but watch on your computer at the same time. We have muted all our attendees so that we have a clearer transmission, and there will be opportunity for you to participate in today's session. We ask that you type your questions in the question box in the control panel at the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can also participate by answering our poll questions. We'll have a few of them for you, and those will be answered directly on the screen. There'll be a time, I'm not sure if we're raising our hands on this today. I'm not sure. But anyway, this webinar is going to be recorded and will be archived on our dibbleinstitute.org website. So with that, let's start with who Charlie and Helen Dibble are. They are, well, Charlie is our founder. We do have a Dibble person. That's where we got our name. Charlie was an aeronautical engineer, and he started this program in his retirement years. He worked with youth in his church. At that time, it was a very high divorce rate. And after attending his grandniece's wedding in the late 90s, he heard her say, "But Uncle Charlie, this is just my first marriage." Well, Charlie became quite alarmed by that response. So he looked around and tried to find, because he was a Mr. Fix-It extraordinaire, and he went and looked for ways, what is happening in our world, in education especially? What are kids learning about keeping those skills at hand? What are they learning to help fill in the gap where the families may not be teaching the skills needed for successful relationships? Well, to make a long story short, Charlie didn't find much, and he quickly realized that he could do something. You know how one person makes such a difference. So in 1996, with the cooperation of fellow business colleagues, educators, and friends, he founded the Dibble Fund, which we now call the Dibble Institute. Charlie's vision was to have accurate, unbiased, and timely research-based information available for you in your job. We pride ourselves in remaining true to Charlie's vision and trust the research for positive outcomes for children. For children. This is not to say that we're anti-divorce, as we also realize there are marriages that are quite frankly best to end. I think the research points to 30% of marriages that probably should have never happened. As far as sexual orientation goes, and we are asked this quite frequently, especially with today's discussion, we believe all young people benefit from being in a healthy relationship and deserve equal treatment. and can learn the skills necessary to form those healthy relationships. Everyone benefits when healthy choices are made. So in keeping with that vision, I am happy to join with Dixie today in talking about conflict management and communications. Dixie Zittlow has been with the Dibble Institute for 5 years now as an outreach educator and trainer. She's an experienced educator of 20 years, a former teacher who has worked with high-risk teens and presents on healthy relationship education for us. She has presented on young adult behavioral issues across the country. She is a CASA court-appointed special advocate for youth volunteer, and she is also the mother of 6 adult children. Myself, I've been with the Dibble Institute since 2004 after working at The Ohio State University Extension in Family and Consumer Science. My work has been with families in transition and financial literacy for teens. I'm a former middle and high school teacher, and my graduate degree is in family studies. So I think that just about covers it now, and I'd like to get started on today's webinar. As I looked over the registration list, I see we have a wide variety of attendees, all of whom are working with teens and young adults in a variety of ways. Your work involves working with teens as school teachers, school social workers, community youth programs, health, faith-based youth programs, extension programs, counseling, just to mention a few of the higher attended, highly represented areas. But basically, it all comes down to our common thread. We all want to help teens live happier and more successful lives. Communication skills is a major skill necessary to building assets for youth. It is part and parcel of the trajectory of teen and life success. We encourage young people to set goals for themselves, but without the ability to communicate effectively, their well-developed emotional brain rules, and the practicing of healthy communications is often missed. The lack of managing conflict through healthy communications can have profound consequences in all aspects of their lives. So today, I want to encourage you to add some research-based tools to your toolbox, ways to help teens learn some of the skills and insights to move on a pathway towards healthy communication, more specifically, to manage their conflicts. We'll be presenting on 3 key points today. The first one being communication patterns are learned over time. Secondly, learning the 4 danger signs of communication. And third key point, managing conflict makes a positive difference. Kathy, I believe we have a poll question for our guest today.
Yes, and Irene, if you could just speak up a little bit. We have a few people that are having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I'm sorry about that. I'm doing my best here.
There you go.
Okay, the first poll question. What % of teens will be involved in some sort of romantic relationship by the time they graduate from high school? So if you would just indicate directly on the screen what percentage you think are involved.
I'm going to give you all a few seconds before I close out the poll. Excuse me. All righty, Irene, I'm going to share this with you. It looks like 35% think that 80% of the teens will be involved in some type of romantic relationships. And then it goes down to 23% say 95%. I'm sorry, 32% say 90%, and then 23% say 95%.
Well, thanks, Kathy, and thank you all who participated. Well, that's quite a spread. And actually, according to research, and there's some variance here, 40% of teens will be involved in some sort of romantic relationship by the time they graduate from high school. So if you would just indicate directly on the screen what percentage you think are involved. if you want to change the slide, Kathy. According to research, almost 95% of teens will be involved in at least one romantic relationship by the time they graduate from high school. When you put two people together, there will eventually be some conflict. And where there is conflict, there could be a lot of pain. And a lot of that conflict is experienced in unhealthy relationships. Of course, teens, like all of us, are involved in many relationship types. You know, so many of them come from mixed households. They're dealing with step-parenting, step-siblings, grandparents, not to mention the kids that are working. They have authority figures they're dealing with. They have their peers, their teachers, a lot of different interactions to work on. At this time in their life, especially for those in early puberty and adolescence, romantic relationships are new territory for them and can be extremely confusing and stressful. And just as family chaos for adults can have negative effects on the job, so too unhealthy romantic relationships has its negative effect on school life. I'm sure you've all seen a lack of attention, motivation, and even the seeking of negative forms of self-medication that can come out of a negative relationship or love life. Various research studies show that 80% of teens have a vision for getting married someday, and over 90% will either marry or cohabitate. So it is doubly important to teach them the skills now so they will know how to handle themselves in a way that strengthens their relationships rather than damages them. So that leads us to our first key point today. Communication patterns are learned over time. Where do they learn how they communicate when you get to them? How we learn to express ourselves and, most importantly, respond to conflict is learned very early in life. It begins as early as being born female or male and continues through the first nonverbal communication between an infant and its mother. Brain research, and there's been so much of it now, has revealed much about our biological makeup, which explains how boys and girls communicate differently. For example, if you're a girl, you've been programmed to make sure you keep social harmony. According to Dr. Brizendine, if you are a girl, it is best to be born to an unstressed mom who has a calm, loving partner and family to support her. Research indicates that maternal stress in utero may result in a less calm female infant after birth. And as she develops, you can blame the presence of about 6 to 8 times the amount of estrogen in her than what boys have to count for her desire to socialize. This is evident in the difference of play behavior. Boys tend toward high physical activity, while girls being more about social contact. You can see in this picture how she is so intent on reaching out to the boy, and he just seems complacent about being with anybody else. He seems happy with his stick or toy. Nature certainly has the strongest hand in launching sex-specific behaviors, but experience, practice, and interaction with others can modify neurons and brain wiring. We can learn new behavior. Thank heavens for that. Nonverbal interaction between an infant mother affects early brain programming. These interactions, also called proto-conversations, are our first lesson on how to interact. We learn to synchronize emotionally with facial expressions long before we have words. And just as feelings were the main topic of these proto-conversations for us as infants, they remain the bedrock of communications in adulthood. For those of you working with pregnant and parenting teens, this has a profound implication for teaching parenting for infants, helping young mothers respond to her baby, and also about the health of parental relationships, which has enormous effects on outcomes for the child. also important is including male-female differences in communicating, and of course in all behaviors. Relationship education for these young parents can positively change the lives of their children. This brings us to the influence of our families on how we communicate. Growing up in high-conflict homes is considered a traumatic event in life, and many of you in the corrections and foster care field have seen the negative outcomes of this. I wouldn't also be surprised to hear that many of you may recall some very negative, high-conflict family interactions at least once in your growing up. Conflict is going to happen. Communication styles modeled in the home become the norm. It is an embedded behavior culture. Until we are exposed to other forms, this becomes our expectation on how we communicate with others and for them to communicate with us. In spite of painful outcomes, we still expect to do the same thing. Teaching teens communication skills, how to manage conflict, not only will have a positive effect on their lives, but can impact generations to come, and hopefully breaking those cycles of domestic violence. Again, the good news is that bad habits can be replaced. It is so important to emphasize this concept to teens. The first step to replacing bad habits is recognizing them by guiding them to a decision for change. Because we often repeat family patterns, it's useful to help teens identify and examine various patterns learned from family and decide how to effectively use these same patterns has been useful to them and effective, and consequently decide what to keep and what to change. We have a tool that we use in some of our material, and I'm going to have available to you when we record this webinar on the same website and their archives. There will be a downloadable sample of this very same tool. It's a worksheet that's available in the Relationship Smarts Plus student workbook. And what it is a list of 9 questions that the teens look at. Here's an example. Could family members disagree with one another? And the teens are given a choice of 3 answers. Whenever one choice is, whoever had the loudest voice or most power got his or her way. I can remember my dad was pretty much in control of the family. There were no questions asked. Second selection, yes, most of the time we voiced our disagreements or opinions freely. Thirdly, we do not like to disagree, so we just kept silent. There are many friends that I had who never heard their parents ever argue, or that their family never disagreed with one another. So the student will choose then which one of these is their experience growing up. A second question is, when there were conflicts or problems, we possibly yelled and screamed at each other, much like this family seems to be doing. One person stormed out and the issue was never mentioned again. Something like putting their head in the sand. Or after we cooled down, we got to talking about the issue and tried to solve our differences. So after the students go through all 9 of these questions, they are then asked to circle the most positive ones and then the most destructive ones. Identify the kind of communication you want for your future family and list it below. According to John Gottman's study, all couples have differences, but what researchers have discovered is that it is not so much whether a couple has conflicts and differences, but rather how they communicate and resolve their conflict. How they handle their differences over time is really what matters. Well, we went through and looked at the family. Now let's go and look at a teen's world. How do they communicate? What are they doing today? Well, let's talk about texting. And I'm sure you all have your own opinion about this. But true or false? Poll question number 2. Are teens who have grown up in the technology age better equipped with the skills to be effective communicators? What do you think? Yes or no? Please answer.
I'm going to give you a few more seconds to vote. All righty, I'm going to share the results with you, and it looks like we have an overwhelmingly a majority saying no.
Not surprised. Thanks, everyone. Texting has exploded in the last decade or so. Most teens report that they would rather text than talk on the phone. How many of you are now texting something that you probably thought, I don't see the need of it, but are finding that there are conveniences added that it adds to our life? It is common today to walk into restaurants and see a table of people engaged more with a cell phone conversation than with each other at that table. Instead of families taking advantage of a peaceful time to talk with one another, they choose to continue communicating with the outer world. Many teens average thousands of texts a month. Patterns of communication even translate into the technical world. New rules for communicating are being formed. Texts include short, quick phrases, which can easily be misinterpreted, especially in the absence of body language. Remember our first way we learned how to communicate through facial expression? Well, that's missing here. Texting is a way to avoid face-to-face conflict. Hence, I've heard of people breaking up over the telephone by texting, not even voice-to-voice. This is all new territory for research. So back to the original question. Are teens better communicators because of technology? The jury is still out and the research is still coming in. But I would bet we all have both good and bad negative feelings about today's teens using technology. Kind of reminds me a bit of when TVs came out, the big debate on how it was going to ruin our world. There are so many tools to help teens recognize the difference between healthy and unhealthy communications. But relevance is key here. Using visuals such as movie clips, and one movie that comes to mind for me is Breaking Up with Jennifer Aniston, has a lot of great scenarios in it. Also, scenes taken from TV, YouTube, music videos, and current literature can all be useful to engage teens in the discussion. Dixie will now address the 4 danger signs of communication. Dixie?
Well, thank you, Irene. Before we move into that, let's stop. Kathy, are there any questions that have come in that we should address first?
It looks like we might, excuse me, have one question. And also to say again that there will be a bibliography and the copies of the student workbook worksheets on our website by our archived video webinar, and it should be there by Tuesday. But someone is asking, does Dibble have any outcome research that demonstrate the effectiveness of relationship skills training?
You know, we have quite a few studies that are taking place. And in fact, the Relationship Smarts Plus curriculum was part of a 5-year study with Auburn University. And one of probably the best results that we can point to in that is that it reduced aggression in teens in their interactions with their romantic partners. and also increased family communication. And that's true also for connections, dating and emotions, and connections, relationship, and marriage. That also went over a long-term study, and those were the outcomes of it. So yes, relationship education does have positive impact. And right now we are finding very similar results in our use of Youth Build has piloted our programs for the last 2 years, and we're working with them and so forth. But all of these evaluations are available on our website. If you look at each program you might be interested in, or in the toolbar that is across the top, there's a blue toolbar, evaluations are listed on there. And it can tell you very definitely what those results are. Thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Irene. Before we go on to point 2, I also want to point out what the research is behind the 4 danger signs concepts that we're going to be talking about. And you'll see it's cited here on the screen. Understanding negative consequences of particular patterns is essential. And the 4 danger signs is taken from PrEP, a leading research and skills-based program for adult couples. And PrEP, Prevention Relationship Enhancement Program, was developed by Howard Markman, Scott Stanley, Susan Bloomberg, Natalie Jenkins at the University of Denver. There's more information on this subject also in a book called Fighting for Your Marriage by these PrEP creators, Howard Markman, Scott Stanley, Susan Bloomberg, and then also our authors, Marlene Pearson and Shar Campton, integrated this PrEP research principles of communication into their curricula and modified it for a teen audience. So, point 2 is learning the 4 danger signs helps manage conflict and improves communication. And communication is the key strategy for managing this conflict. Effective communication is something that we learn. It doesn't just come naturally, and it may even need to be taught, especially if unhealthy patterns, as were pointed out earlier, are what has been the model. In order to get closer to what is healthy, let's look at what those 4 danger signs are. And let me also point out that several of the DIBBLE programs have lessons teaching teens on how to recognize these negative patterns using those PrEP principles that we talked about earlier. So the 4 danger signs are escalation, put down or invalidation, negative interpretations, avoidance, or withdrawal. So we're going to start with escalation. And what does this look like? And how do we define this? And everybody has a way of defining words. So let's get all on the same page here. It's defined as, in a routine conversation is erupted into something destructive or out of control arguments. Negative comments are spewed, and often with hurtful and nasty words. An example might be, things have been going okay with the 2 of you, and then you have an argument that starts over something relatively small. The exchange gets heated pretty quickly, there's yelling back and forth, and he says, forget it, it's over, I'm not coming back, and he storms out the door. Often there is regret about those words and actions, but, well, who hasn't gotten upset? Probably all of us have. So how do we deal with escalation? Well, we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes when we talk about timeouts. So I want you to hold on to that thought, and we're going to move on to the next danger sign. Next danger sign is put downs or invalidation. These are stinging arrows, and it's defined like making the other person appear less, invalid, incapable, not, and let's fill in the blank. I wouldn't get so upset with you if you weren't so stupid or incapable. And a lot of times there's name calling involved. Dangerous or danger involved here? Yes. In unhealthy communication, someone is being projected as less than the other. They are not on equal footing. These put-downs may be common in everyday occurrences between people and families and all different kinds of relationships. It focuses a lot of times on someone's vulnerability. Are you going outside looking like that? And sometimes these put-downs even are presented in a humorous way, as if someone is being sarcastic and they didn't really mean it. But nonetheless, they are put-downs. Put-downs are also a classic sign of emotional abuse. Well, the scars from being hit eventually heal. The scars on a person's soul are destructive when put-downs are there, and sometimes they last for a lifetime. Does putting someone down solve the conflict? No, absolutely not. We are starting to do a decent job on helping teens to understand the dangers of physical abuse, but when it comes to emotional abuse, I'm afraid that we have a ways to go on this. Helping teens to understand this concept that put-downs will never help solve their conflict in a way that strengthens the relationship rather than damaging it will be a good first step in starting to change that. And the classic phrase, talk to the hand because the face isn't listening, is a great example of invalidation or being ignored. Go ahead and ask teens if they think anything good is going to come out of this conversation that they see here. Invalidation will not get you any closer to the goal of dealing with the conflicts in a healthy manner. Another danger sign is negative interpretation, defined like this. This is when someone takes what you say and turns it around. Have you ever felt like some person was turning around what you said, or did something become more negative than what was meant? It's when someone always, and yes I mean always, believes or expects the worst about you. For example, my girl will just believe what she says about me, what she wants to about me. I try in so many ways to be responsible. I just can't please her. It seems she always points out the little screw-ups and never notices the good things that I do. So why is this dangerous to a relationship? In time, negative interpretation can take over your view of another person. And soon you don't even see half of the positive things that the other person does or says. And a person can become demoralized or discouraged by feeling that another person never recognizes anything positive about them. And lastly, our last danger sign is withdrawal and avoidance, defined like this. This is when someone, a partner, a friend, a family member, or someone that you might even work with, avoids talking about important things with you, or who tends to withdraw from the conversation once important issues come up. An example might sound like this. I really want to talk to my boyfriend about where he stands in our relationship. I don't know how serious he is. Every time I try to bring it up, he either totally avoids it by changing the subject or says, I don't want to talk about it. Don't pressure me. Dangerous to the relationship? Well, certainly frustrating, possibly demeaning, and this could lead to escalation or negative interpretation. Dangerous to the relationship because it could become a pattern that leads to further unhealthy relationship. Withdrawal and avoidance can be appropriate. And I'm going to ask you to go to your question box, and I'm going to ask you to give me some feedback on this. Here's the question. How or when could withdrawal be appropriate? And think about that. Type that into your questions box. How or when could withdrawal be appropriate, an appropriate response? Kathy, what are you receiving?
Okay, it looks like someone has said when one of the persons need time to calm down, and when the other person is getting out of control, definitely when your personal safety is in question, or that the other person is becoming abusive or aggressive, and physical situations, when someone feels like they are going to snap, then they need to turn around.
Right.
We have lots of answers that.
Good.
Oh, and also when someone's intoxicated, you might need to just
walk
around.
away from the situation. Well, I thank you for that feedback, and I guess I wanted to point out that there's a difference between withdrawing from a situation like that and what we call here as a danger sign of withdrawal avoidance, where someone is shutting down and just not communicating. When we get in and talk here in a couple of seconds about timeouts, you'll see exactly what you're saying is absolutely the only time or the kind of times where withdrawal would be appropriate. Thank you again for that. So, any of the danger signs can become a pattern also to intimate partner violence. And we're not going to really get into what that is. It's also known as IPV. But danger signs are there. They send up red flags and they say to us, something is not right. And we want to teach that because this is an appropriate time in a relationship when someone takes note and says, I need to do some reevaluation here. In this slide, we can see that there's a whole lot of shouting going on and a whole lot of listening not going on. I'm sorry, were you saying something? And we have verbal and nonverbal communication that we can see here. Understanding what is going on in the brain is a clue that we want to look at here for how we can deal with this conflict in communicating more effectively. So what happens to the brain when you're frustrated or angry or any of those 4 danger signs are triggered? When you are emotionally upset, researchers are literally able to watch on an MRI machine the blood flow go from the front of your brain to the bottom of your brain. So the front of your brain is where the prefrontal cortex is and your ability to think rationally and come up with creative ideas. On this slide from our Healthy Choices, Healthy Relationships program, which teaches teens about their brain and the roles that it plays in romantic relationships, you'll see the different parts of the brain there. And a lot of times we think that teens would not want to hear about their brain. But when talking about this and showing them what's going on, you'll get them on the edge of their seat. Now, on the next slide, the bottom of the brain is where the amygdala, which is always a hard word for me to say, where the amygdala is, and this basically comes up with only 2 solutions when those danger signs are there: fight or flight. So in essence, the blood flow literally transfers control of what you say and do from the rational thinking part of your brain to the reactionary part of your brain. Hence, once the blood flow is stored in the front of your brain, you can remember what you said and did in the heat of the moment, but you can't for the life of you figure out why you did that. So when you ask yourself why you acted in such a way, well, you can blame it on the bottom of your brain. The bad news is that the front of your brain has to try to pick up the pieces. So once you explain this to teens, why their emotions took over, most of them will want to know what they can do about it. Well, one of the alternatives is a timeout. And this goes back to when we cited those 4 danger signs. Timeouts aren't just for escalation. They're also for withdrawal and avoidance, because withdrawal avoidance is just the flip side of escalation when it comes to danger signs. Calling a timeout can be hard, though, especially because the bottom of the brain is screaming to just say this one last thing, and then he or she will understand. But learning to do this can break those patterns. It gives everyone a new perspective on how to address the issue. And it can be very empowering. The good news is, just like we stated before, that Dr. John Gottman has found that research has found that the transfer of control in your brain takes place when your resting heart rate goes 10% above its normal rate. So if you can't figure out how to self-monitor when this transfer takes place, you can go to the App Store. You know, there's an app for everything nowadays on your smartphones. And you can find an app that'll set off a warning sign for when your heart rate becomes elevated. Wouldn't this be a great thing to do for a class activity for you teachers out there? Timeout, it's not just for teens. It's for teens and even us adults. So let's go over these steps of what should happen during that timeout. We want to remember to say we or I in a timeout, not pointing a finger. You need a timeout. Not going to get you what you want. And then do or say something to calm yourself down. And we're going to go into this a little bit further too. Identify the hurt that's behind the anger. And remember this acronym, VIEW. And VIEW stands for this. You have value, you are important, you are equal, and you are worthy. And lastly, this is really important. Wait at least 30 minutes before you come back together. But don't wait more than 24 hours before you talk again. Once that happens, it's very easy to just forget about what was said and push things under the carpet. It's important also to visualize a peaceful place in your mind or go for a walk. Stephen Stosny's research talks about finding that peaceful place, breathing deeply, calming yourself down. The only thing dwelling on a conflict is going to do is to keep you agitated. So find that peaceful place and learn how to self-soothe and be calm. Find that internal healing. And once you get back together, or these young people get back together, they need to have a plan. And there are several innovative tools and exercises in the DIBBLE programs that can help them to learn how to do that as well.
Dixie,
Yes,
I'm sorry. I just need to interrupt you a moment because I think if we go on, we're going to lose this. Can you repeat what VIEW stands for?
Oh, yes, I can. VIEW is, and I should have wrote this down because I thought about that later too. VIEW is you have value, you are important, you are equal, and you are worthy. And that's something that you want to view, you want to keep in mind while you're calming down.
Thank
There
you.
are also, you're welcome. There are also several other innovative tools and exercises in DIBBLE programs that can help change those patterns and address those 4 danger signs, such as what we've already pointed out, knowing what the 4 danger signs are, using and taking that time out, using a speaker-listener technique when talking becomes difficult, and using this technique called WWA, which is a great way to complain effectively. WWA stands for what, when or where, and how it affected you. What happened, when or where did that happen, and how did it affect you? That's a great way to complain about something or bring up an issue that you want to talk about. And then also using a problem-solving model. The question teens need to ask themselves is, as you work through these skills for yourself, ask, is your partner willing to do the same? Is this relationship working and going where I want it to go? So let's just review very quickly here. We first of all have talked about our patterns of communication and where they have come from. And we've looked at the 4 danger signs of communication. Knowing this and the skills can change those patterns and to help us be more effective in communication. And it definitely will impact lives now and in the future. And Kathy, do we have any other questions that we want to address before Irene moves on? She's going to be talking about how healthy communication skills impact lives.
Yes, if you could just repeat the acronym WWA one more time.
Yes, I will. Yes, I will. WWA stands for what, like what happened, when or where did it happen, and how it affected you.
Thank you, Dixie.
You're welcome. Miss Irene, would you expound on those healthy communication skills?
Thanks, Dixie. Glad you asked. Well, our third point is managing conflict makes a positive difference. We've already mentioned the long-term benefits of teaching conflict management skills to teens. Learning these skills affect many, many aspects of a teen's life, as we also mentioned, can affect future generations to follow. As they form their family, and given that so many of them will eventually have a family, we know that if we can affect their way of communicating in their dating life, this will carry over into healthy committed relationships for the future. And their children will learn them as well and can change the style pattern of a family. Very, very good for our future. But another important outcome of managing conflict is our health. When conflict is managed, our health can improve as well. Conflict brings stress, and we are always hearing in the news how stress can harm the body. Chronic stress hormones over time upsets the body's normal regulatory systems by changing the internal environment. Things are going on. We have no idea of danger that is happening inside. Body functions slow down and run less efficiently in order to provide energy for other places. This wears the body's ability to do strenuous tasks, relax, and fight disease. If allowed to continue, the body does not receive enough nutrients to continue working, and vital organs are weakened. Now that person is vulnerable to a variety of physical and psychological issues. With the ongoing health care debates, the health of the individual can have both a positive or negative impact on the community. This leads us to the economy and employment. Good communication skills can help one to not only get a job, but keep it. You know, when you get a job, you have to have very specific skills. But to keep that job, you have to be able to stay in tune with the people that you work with. On-the-job relationships between employee and boss are essential. In our June e-newsletter, it featured an article entitled, "What Do Employers Really Want?" really want, by Drs. Randall and Catherine Hansen. It listed the top skills needed for employability. And to no surprise to us here at the Dibble Institute, the first one listed was communication. because it is listed as a soft skill, something that is very difficult to get to in today's education world. It's so often, and I'm sure many of you FACS teachers will say, I can do that, but there's never any time for us in the full curriculum. First on the list are communication skills, as I said. And what this is on this particular slide is how it reads in a job requirement. It is the job ad is looking for an exceptional listener and communicator who effectively conveys information verbally and in writing. And that's what translates to overall communication skills. As Dixie pointed out, how to keep your conflict or your emotions out of the conflict will help tremendously, because there is always going to be conflict at some point. Interpersonal skills is another very important soft skill. The ability to relate to your coworkers, inspire others to participate, and mitigate conflict with coworkers is essential given the amount of time spent at work each day. And it is listed on that resume, proven relationship builder with unsurpassed interpersonal skills. I suppose it's important to ask here, where do our teens today learn these soft skills? True inner satisfaction comes with being a person who feels confident about their abilities to handle life's situation, has healthy support system in family and friends, has found a purpose in life, and who feels connected to both inner and the outer world. Managing conflict is a major part of that piece. So let's help bring peace to one's life by teaching relationship skills. Today we talked about the large number of teens who are involved and want a healthy romantic life. They're a great audience. Secondly, we talked and addressed the 4 danger signs of communication. And thirdly, we talked about how it impacts our life. Now it's your turn to add any thoughts or tools you have used to increase communication skills. Kathy, do we have any more comments or questions out there from our audience?
I think we'll give them a few seconds here to write some questions down or any other comments they might have. Does anyone have any more comments? I did want to say that, again, on our webinar will be archived. I know this is a question, and I plan to have it on the website by Tuesday morning. And what I will do is I will also add a PDF of these slides so that you can print them out and take notes if you want to look at the webinar once again on your own and take notes.
And I might add, if you have a comment that is not addressed today, that we will personally email you an answer should you have a question.
Okay. And I do have a question here. Do you all have any more tips for applying these communication skills in a work environment?
Oh, well, you know, they're pretty much basically, I think, the same. What do you think, Dixie?
I would say going over what the 4 danger signs are in the workplace and talking about how to mitigate or how to change that, what a healthy environment looks like. I believe, just as you're pointing out, Irene, that really any type of situation or environment, going over that will help. Sometimes not realizing what looks dangerous is something that needs to be learned, but then also, so what can I do about it? Seeing what the brain does and seeing what timeout looks like, and you know, how to calm down and how to come back together, and actually practicing it can be very empowering to even in the workplace.
Well, you know, people bring their habits from their family both to their relationships, whether it's romantic, family, or on the job. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we've all worked with people who have very poor communication skills, who you kind of tiptoe around because that emotional side is triggered so quickly, or who don't listen to anything you say,
Mm-hmm.
suggestions you make, or are misinterpreting. Oh, you're just trying to get ahead. You're trying to be get the attention of the boss. Whatever the hidden messages that they have are. So these same principles apply no matter where they're being expressed.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that Crystal has made a good observation, I think a very positive observation, that it seems to me she must be a teacher, and she says that when they teach the 4 danger signs to students in the classroom, they're more aware of them outside the classroom, and they have the tools available to help them outside the classroom, which is really what, what we're trying to do, is help them in all phases of their life. One person was asked, and I believe we kind of alluded to this, but do you believe role-playing could be a tool to use in effective communication for high school students that may be in an unhealthy relationship? What do you think about role-playing some of these things, Dixie and Irene?
Well, in the program where this activity comes from, there are skits and role plays that can be done, talking points, and that gives them, again, the opportunity to identify and to see how it could be done differently. Irene?
Well, yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think role-playing is great, but I think it's even at its best when the teams themselves write the script for the role play, because it is very relevant to things that are going on around them, and it's more natural. I think so often in my experiences with role play, I don't quite connect to it. It sounds almost too staged, but if I have someone, if I'm allowed to help create it, I put my experience into it, and I think that helps tremendously.
Definitely. And Dixie and Irene, can you mention again the book that someone is interested in? I believe a couple different things. One, the book that Prep has put out that talks about the 4 danger signs. The name of that book is what?
Fighting for Your Marriage.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry?
it's on the bibliography that we're
Okay.
going to
To
have
send out?
available.
Okay, or have available in archive. And then the other thing is, Dixie, you alluded to this a few times, and Irene, you can chime in. What is the curricula that we have published with the help of the writers that write for us that have incorporated the Prep? What curricula is that would have these chapters or this information in it as well?
Well, I'll be glad to answer that one. It's Love Notes, Relationship Smarts Plus, Connections, Relationships, and Marriage, and Connections, Dating, and Emotions. Those 4 have Prep principles integrated throughout.
Great, thank you. And there are sample lessons, maybe different sample lessons available on our website when you go and look up each curricula, that you can kind of get an overview, and the chapter and the table of contents as well is listed there.
Well, it looks like time is almost up. So let me alert you to next month's information. We want to keep in touch with you, and you can do that at our website, or text DIBBLE to 22828. That's foreign information to me, I have to say. But you can like us on Facebook. That's an easy one. And follow us on LinkedIn. In fact, I think we have quite a few people registered today who found out about us through Facebook. So we're excited to see that. Our email address is relationshipskills@dibbleinstitute.org. And that goes directly to Kathy's desk. So any questions about curriculum, and we are always there to help you make the right curriculum decision for your particular needs. We offer free shipping within 30 days of this webinar, and that's a 10% savings. Use the code webinar at checkout. And finally, what is next month's topic? It's a good one. Next month is Essential Lessons Learned in Dating, Teaching the Stages of Relationship. Elspeth Martindale is going to be our presenter, and she is the developer of Things to Know Before You Say Go, a card deck and book, which are very exciting materials to help teens to recognize, is this a healthy relationship? It's been great being with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had a good experience, found some new information, and we're always happy to hear from you in any form. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.